And write down the time. And start off by inviting our outgoing student representatives, Elle O'Connor and Charlie Savage, to introduce one of our new incoming student representatives.
Hello, everybody. We're in the back here, passing on the torch. So we recently elected two new student representatives for the school committee. Very, very qualified, and we're really excited.
Yeah. With us is Maher, and we also have Michaela Jens, who will be joining us shortly.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm Maher, I'm a sophomore. I'm super excited to be on the school board. Thank you all for having me back. Super excited to get to know all of you, work with you. I know Elle and Charlie have done a fantastic job over the past 2 years, so I'll do my best to carry on their hard work and motivation as they go to college, but I look forward to the next 2 years.
Well, welcome, Maher, and we'll hear more from you in your report a little bit later on.
Awesome, thank you.
So with that, I'd like to move on into our public hearing on school choice. So if we could have a motion to open the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. We are in our public hearing. So just to review the agenda for the hearing, we'll start with a recommendation from our superintendent. Then the committee can discuss the recommendation. We'll take any public comments, should there be members of the public here. During this public comment session, it's only public comments on the school choice issue. There'll be another public comment section in our regular meeting a little bit later on. And we'll follow the usual public comment rules of a period of 20 minutes, identify yourself by name and address, and not more than 3 minutes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hackett to give his recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. So tonight is the school choice public hearing. As you are well aware, because you've been doing this for a while, every year by law, you are, as a school committee, required to take action on school choice as to whether or not school choice being allowing students from other towns who are not resident students in Winchester to attend Winchester schools. With that comes some incentive or some financial support from the state. We essentially receive the state funding, Chapter 70 funds for that student or those students. There are many schools who do participate. There are many more that do not participate. It really depends on a couple of things. And one of the biggest factors in terms of making the decision, and it's historically been true in Winchester, is growth in enrollment that you experience with resident students, as well as limited space. And historically, you have voted to not allow for school choice for those two reasons. If you were to not take any action, you are automatically enrolled in school choice, which is why we have to take a vote to not participate. It's a negative affirmation, I guess. Probably not, but you do have to take a vote to not participate in order to keep from being put into the pool of participants. So consistent really with what you've done historically, but more importantly, I think for us right now, my recommendation would be to not participate in school choice for the 23-24 school year. There are a few factors, one of which we're right in the midst of right now, which is preparing Parkhurst for Lynch students to come to Parkhurst. We were adding 14 modular units, as you know, and we were making quite a bit significant renovations actually within the building. So we will be taking the Lynch Elementary School completely offline. Additionally, the central office has to be out of Parkhurst as a result. As you know, we already have the business office here at the high school, and that currently is taking up three spaces, and it will take up an additional space, I believe, additional 2 space when we hit July 1. The other components of the central office, including my office, curriculum instruction, human resources, special education, will be housed at Lincoln Elementary School. We do not need to take a classroom to do that, which is a good thing because we do need an additional classroom. We're borrowing a classroom at Lincoln for incoming Lynch kindergarten students because we can only offer one section of kindergarten at Parkhurst for Lynch students. So truly, for the next 2 years, we are very tight on space. Morocco does not have any additional classroom spaces, I'm saying that understanding that adding one student doesn't mean you need a whole new classroom, but it is a challenge for us, I think, for the next couple of years to just to get through this transitional period. In addition, as you know, we do have a couple of housing developments that are coming online, and we are anticipating that we'll start to see some of the impact or some of the enrollment from those projects actually within the 23-24 school year. So for all of those reasons, I would suggest that a motion be made that Winchester Public Schools not participate in school choice program for the 23-24 school year due to enrollment constraints. Due to increasing enrollment and space limitations. We are also, just to add to the increasing enrollment, we are up in our enrollment just from October 1 count. We are knocking potentially still on the door of 300 kindergarten students coming in next year, which is a significant increase from the last 3 years that we've experienced. So that would be my recommendation.
So
To answer any questions.
procedurally, I should have mentioned that during this hearing, we'll hear the superintendent's recommendation. We'll discuss it, public comments if there are any, and then we'll close it, and the vote will happen outside of in our regular meeting. So at this point, do members of the committee have any questions or comments for the superintendent?
I only would just add with respect to growth, it's significantly impacted by the construction that we're seeing today. So River Street looks, I mean, they're bringing in sod, I think, right now. They're doing their final landscaping. Cambridge Street is flying along. So we have quite a bit of development, and those are not, they're not age marketed, they're not age restricted, so they're open to families with kids. And although we made some projections about what the distribution would be within those developments in terms of impact on elementary, middle school, and high school, that was none other than just an average of what we already have in town. So we could find that these are attracting families with younger kids, or it could be, the inverse. It could be some folks who want to move in so their kids can come to Winchester High School. So it's really hard to kind of predict, but there's some significant capacity there coming online. So I support the recommendation for all the reasons the superintendent stated.
Any other comments? Mr. Brady.
I'll just add, I appreciate Frank's recommendation. He and I talked today, and he's put a lot of thought into that, and I appreciate that. I've been advocating for this for a while, so I'll continue to advocate for it. We can open up 2, 3, 4 slots at the high school. Wouldn't make any difference. So we're choosing not to do it. That's fine. Harvard did it last year. Westford did it last year. They survived. You pick what grades you want. You pick the exact number of seats you want. You might not even get anyone. Winchester's never done it, to my knowledge. Our historian can chime in if he thinks we ever have, but I don't know that we've ever done it, so I think it's something we need to consider doing, and I'll keep advocating that we do it. Obviously, start with a very small program, see how it goes. We're leaving revenue on the table. Everyone always worries over the revenue in the poor town of Winchester, and this is a chance to bring in some revenue and help some kids, so I see it as a win-win. But again, I appreciate the superintendent's thoughts on it.
Thank you. Other, Mr.
Reply to
Nixon?
that. I think that would be I look forward to that conversation at the table. It could happen as early as May of 25, because Lynch will be opening in the fall. It'll be substantially complete by then. We'll have a much clearer picture of what impact 40B has had on us, but we'll just have a much bigger impression of overall enrollment. We obviously will know what the capacity is of Lynch. So my point being, we don't have to wait until Lynch is open to revisit the very point Mr. Brady is making. We can get closer to Lynch completion, but we don't have to wait till it's open.
Great. Any other comments?
Can I actually ask a question about what Mr. Brady said to Dr. Hackett? Does my understanding is it doesn't bring us additional revenue, but we get Chapter 70 funds that cover our cost of adding the student to the district. Is that correct? It's not an over and above. It's not a revenue generating. It just allows us to break even in terms of the cost of educating the additional
So we
student.
do get the Chapter 70 funding. Clearly, adding one student to a high school of this many kids is really, there's not any increased cost.
Right,
Assuming we have open seats in the schedule, which we, as we know at the high school, we are still trying to get kids out of study halls. We'd like to add electives. And there are some sections that we can run, some sections we can't run. So that the students that would come through school choice would go through the same registration process and class sign-up process as all of the students.
right.
But I think you could, pretty safe to say, under normal circumstances, you're gonna get more revenue from each individual student that you're gonna actually spend on the students that you take in. It would take a while to get to a critical mass of school choice students before you'd really have to start adding staff
Right,
at the high school and probably also at the middle school. It could happen at the elementary school pretty quickly and pretty easily, but to Mr. Brady's point, you can pick the grade level, how many slots you have available, and also just to, as you know, just to say it again, when we accept students with school choice, those students stay with us through their academic life.
right.
So
So no matter what services they need or,
any additional services above and beyond
Is that-
general education,
right,
we would bill back to the community that they're coming from.
okay. But it's the same Chapter 70 funding we get for any additional
Correct.
student that comes
Correct.
into Winchester.
Correct.
It's not an over and above.
No, it is not.
Okay.
Any other comments from the committee? Hearing none, I do not believe we have any public comment people here. And so I would ask if there's a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and public hearing is closed. Our next item of business is to vote on the consideration, to vote on the superintendent's recommendation on school choice. So do we have a motion for that?
Just point of order, does the motion have to include the reasons that were just articulated?
I was just going to ask Dr.
Yes.
Hackett to read his
That
motion
would be
again.
helpful.
Do you want-
Space constraints is enough of a reason, which is why I kind of stumbled over increasing enrollment, but we do have an increasing enrollment, but it's more significant is the space
space
constraints we have.
Do you want to read it for the minute?
Sure. So I would be recommending that the Winchester Public Schools not participate in the school choice program for the 23-24 school year due to increasing enrollment and space limitations.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I should have waited. Mr. Rady, did you have
All
I'm not in
opposed?
favor.
sorry. Okay, opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for
No
the
worries.
shorthand there. So we have 4 in favor, 1 opposed. All right, moving right along. Public comment is next on our agenda. We don't have anyone here for public comment? Saves me reading the public comment
Well,
rules.
unofficial members now of the school committee.
Oh, yes, you community members down there, do you want to have public comment?
I do not have anything to
Nope.
comment.
You don't let her handle that.
All right. Well, then you save me reading the rules about public comment. All right, so moving right along to reports and updates and action items. So our next item is to continue the conversation about the Lynch Solar Project. We're not voting on this tonight, but particularly because we just met with the select board last night and want to give committee members an opportunity to digest and ask any follow-up questions they may have. But we thought it important to keep the conversation moving forward. So, and I see Mr. Nixon, I believe Mr. Nixon has a document up there, or maybe Dr. Hackett. But do one of you want to? It looks
So-
like.
So for those who complain about the sloth of government, we are working hard to disabuse them of any such criticism of us in this process. I thought it was a good conversation to the joint meeting last night. we had committed to follow up on a number of questions that were presented at the table. This does that. I don't think this will.
Chris, is this in our email?
What's that?
Is this in our email? I'm just having trouble
So
seeing.
I put it in the shared drive.
It's in the
Yeah.
shared drive.
Tonight.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just read this because it's pretty short. So following up on questions posed at last night's joint meeting of the Select Board and School Committee, we did have the opportunity today to confer with TAPE and Zapotec and are following up. So to the first question, is the savings on electricity from the proposed solar system folded into the project cost analysis that we reviewed last night? And is that savings actually reflected or accounted for in the projected ROI? And as you remember, Jay Nardone said he believed it was, so that was confirmed today. So the savings from the arrays are reflected in the ROI, the total savings, and the simple payback that was in that chart. Secondly, please confirm that the tax incentive, we talked about that as well, is built into the ROI calculation, or is the tax incentive in the total savings after 25 years column? So Zapotec again confirmed that that tax incentive is subtracted from the total system cost in year 0, so the tax incentive is reflected in the ROI, the total savings, and the simple payback. And then, somewhat ironically, to what seems like the simplest question, it's a much longer and sort of more nuanced answer. What are we paying for electricity today, and what are the assumptions over what electricity will cost, and are there assumptions around periodic adjustments to utility rates that are built into the analysis? So, for anyone who's sort of closely studied your utility bill, there are different components to it, and there are different sort of co-ops you can actually participate in that actually can also impact the bottom line of your bill. So Susan McPhee, who's our energy management coordinator, kind of summarized it helpfully and said, as a general rule of thumb, we're paying around 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, that can vary by building, but that's about what we pay all in. So, but she noted that the two key components of that are supply and then the demand and distribution component. So when we go to a net zero building, the demand and distribution component is basically eliminated because we're developing it on site. And so interestingly, it's Eversource that sets the rates for our buildings. That rate is determined by many different factors, including the size of the building. So for instance, whatever rate we're paying at Lynch today is most certainly not going to be the rate we would pay for the new Lynch. I can't tell you what that rate will be exactly, but it's very much sort of determined on a building by building basis. The detail that Zapotec had in their assumptions, Susan McPhee thought seemed reasonable. And for their financial analysis that sort of drove that report we looked at last night, on the supply side, they see the value of energy of between 14 to 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour. She also thought that seemed reasonable for the supply side of the bill. So, and then to the second element of the question, what about adjustments in rates? So they were assuming 2% increase every year. And Ms. McPhee also thought that seemed like a reasonable assumption. Though, I mean, to Mr. Fallon's point last night, it is sort of hard to predict, right? Where are we really going to be in like 10 or 15 years? But absent crystal ball, these seemed like reasonable assumptions. So anyway, I think those were largely the open questions. So we wanted to get that information out since we were going to be meeting and talking tonight.
Great. Folks have questions or discussion about what we learned last night or what we learned tonight?
No?
So I have a question. If there are no questions, why might we not be voting on something tonight?
Well, I can speak for myself and say I have some questions, but they're probably not school committee questions. And so I want to follow up with other entities, select board and others. So that's my personal reason. And I think it'd be, I believe other committee members may have questions and may not be fully resolved, and maybe I should ask that question if people are fully resolved on this. But do other folks have questions that they're and considerations they want to be thinking about on this project?
I heard
I
a
had
lot
some
of
questions.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
It was mainly about the report because I finally got a chance to read it more carefully. And forgive me, some of these may already have been talked about or discussed, but I just wanted to clarify. So when we're talking about direct ownership systems versus PPA ownership systems, why is it assumed that direct ownership is supposed to be behind the main building meter versus the PPA, which is supposed to be in front? I just didn't understand what difference that made, apart from.
Sure. So it's I'll make an analogy. It's kind of like if you wanted to plug in a toaster in this room, you're using power here in this room. It can be on this side of the meter. The parallel is energy that you create, energy that you're creating on site, that you're going to use on site, doesn't need to be sort of distributed to the grid in the way it would be through a PPA. So in a power purchase agreement, the third-party vendor is basically collecting the energy and they're distributing it back to the grid. We would not actually be using that power, like literally, with the new Lynch. What we would be getting in exchange for that lease agreement with the third-party provider is a discount in our electric bill. So
that's
this
the
is why
15%?
the solar, I'm sorry?
That's the 15%?
That's the 15%, that's
Okay.
right. So that's where that expression comes from, behind or in front of the meter. If it's behind the meter, you're generating power and it's literally coming right into your building. Anything that's flowing through a meter is going to get billed. Think about it that way. So power you're getting from Eversource flows through your electric meter and that drives your bill. But if it's not coming from Eversource because it's coming from solar panels on your roof and you own the panels, you get the benefit of that power. So that's just what that expression means.
Yeah.
And then to further nuance this, because we do own in the base project about 5,000 square feet of solar over the third floor outdoor classroom, which is important to reiterate. So regardless of whether this goes PPA or direct ownership, we already own that bolus of solar. That component is what we call behind the meter.
So if I could chime in and say, the building itself is generating power that the building can run on. In theory, if you look over the course of a year, it's generating all of its power, but the power I imagine will be flowing in and flowing out depending on demand and sun at different times, and hopefully it's metering in and metering out as it does that, so it nets out to zero. But that's all generated, all on-site, self-contained. The PPA is just like another piece of the grid. It's part of our energy company. We happen to be leasing them our roof, but they're generating power and they're selling it, and they happen to be giving, instead of paying us a lease for the roof, they're just giving us discounted power. But it's their power, so it's on their side of the meter, whereas this is our power that we would generate for the building. This is my understanding anyway, and I look at Mr. Nixon and make sure he's nodding when I say that.
It's my understanding.
Yeah.
also.
Yeah. So I'll say, I'm still trying to get my head around some of the numbers, and it. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bolnese, keep going.
I'm sorry, it's more another clarifying question. So on the table 5 chart, just showing the different options for direct ownership versus PPA, there are just columns about the conceptual cost before the ITC and then the project cost before the ITC. And can you just remind me, what is the difference between those?
Between
Like what?
conceptual cost and project cost?
Yes, so one's
Scope.
just scope.
So
Okay.
project cost is everything.
Okay.
So that means project cost includes soft costs. Is that what you mean? when you
Project
say-
cost includes all soft costs.
So consulting and things like that.
And then the last thing that I had was, there was a mention in the opening about Zapotec still had not gotten an answer about if this was going to be, let me see, an ESS, I guess that's the electric energy storage system, and they were reaching out to the Mass Department of Energy Resources. And I guess, when is that answer expected?
I'm not sure I know what the question is, but I'll try to pull up the report so I can, can you read that? excerpt, or do
It
you want me
just
to go find
said,
the report?
Zapotec has received no response from DOER as of May 4th, even after follow-up calls, asking for clarification on I think it's assumption that the 500 kilowatt AC threshold is behind a single Eversource electric account number. I think meaning that it would be less than 500 kilowatts, so.
Oh, I think I understand. They have subsequently confirmed that
They
we
did.
do not need on-site battery storage, given the energy consumption, the modeled energy consumption of the
It's
building
coming out at like 400.
and our production capacity on-site.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Bergstrom, did you have questions?
No, I was just going to say, I do have some additional questions I'd like to follow up on. There are a couple of questions I have about this, but I think it'd be best to follow up with Jay on. To answer Mr. Nixon's question, you know, why I wouldn't be ready to vote on this tonight is, I think the select board just saw this for the first time yesterday. And I would like to give them some time with this and some time to go through their own process and not feel like any vote that we are taking is driving their process or their timeline on thinking about this information as well and giving them time. And I just feel like any vote we take right now is going to drive a process. So I would like to leave the process open until they have an opportunity to digest the information they've been given.
So the motion I would make, if the committee welcomed it, was actually not quite so binary. It would be that the school committee welcomes a power purchase agreement for the new bench and the procurement process to begin absent a direct purchase process voted on by the select board in June. So the idea being, unless we have a problem with a power purchase agreement, we can say we're okay with it, but we also can sort of defer to the select board if they feel that really is the better way to go. I'm not making that motion, but I'm saying that's what it would be. Because
Right,
I'm
and I
not-
kind of feel like that's still a binary choice. I still feel like that's a binary. It's saying we approve a PPA.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just for what it's worth, it's not clear to me how this gets resolved, but I'll wait and I'll watch. I think if people continue to have questions, as Ms. Bergstrom said, send them to Jay. The team is working really hard on the 90% set right now, so it's taking a lot of time to pull this information out of the team. This is not unimportant, but there are other things that are sort of competing for time too. So I was pleased we were able to get some of these answers quickly. I know there are a number of other questions that that management has on a separate issue unrelated to this decision that the team doesn't feel like they're going to have answers until like June 5th at the earliest. So, you know, if people have questions, let's just get them in quickly, because I just don't want to be in a position where it's the end of June and we're still getting questions. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Brady?
I appreciate the work that everyone's done, and this is probably a thing that we'll never get, but I would love to see some kind of independent analysis of this, paid for by people who have no interest at all in the project, just because I'd love to know, like, again, I'd love another opinion on it from someone who has no stake. It's a I don't know how many $1 million project with long-term financial ramifications, so I don't know what it costs to get someone to analyze it, $5,000, $10,000, but I mean, I'd rather do that before just making a decision based on one set of opinions that's coming from one person's consultant who they hired. And, you know, nothing against their consultant, but I can hire a consultant to tell me anything I want them to tell me because I'm hiring them, and that's what they'll do. So, I don't know. Just my opinion on it.
For what it's worth, I don't think Zapotec is telling TAPE what TAPE is telling them to tell them. I think and I'm disappointed if you doubt that, but as we reviewed at the
Well,
last
I mean-
meeting, this is an owner-agent relationship, not an owner-contractor relationship, and there's an important distinction to be made between the two. Zapotec is basically doing all this pro bono. Their fee was to do a conceptual report in the fall. They did that. I actually believe TAPE is just eating the fee thus far for that, but, you know, they continue to provide us information when we ask for it, so nobody's enriching themselves. I'm not sure how to respond to your request, because I would say Zapotec is actually an independent third party. They have nothing to gain in this.
Okay. It's still one opinion, though, so I'd love to have another opinion.
I don't think the notion to have another opinion is so offensive. I'm not questioning Zapotec, but I understand that this is a new choice that towns are making. That, you know, in the past, we've always gone with the PPA because that was our only choice. And I just don't know how much experience a lot of these solar companies, I'm not even sure who you would find to do it. Mr. Brady is, I guess, where I'm going. And I'd love more information on that if something exists, because I think making this choice is a new one for school districts, for municipalities with the tax credit that's come out. And so having a second look at the information, I'd love FinCom to look at have time to look at the information and the financial analysis that has been presented as well. Just because it is new and it's a new choice, and whenever we do something new, it's nice to have different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's not a lack of trust. It's
So-
just thinking outside the box, different ideas.
I appreciate that.
It's a big chance.
The Lynch
Yeah, it's a
project
big chance.
is a train that continues to roll. So
Yep.
just thinking back to some of the conversations we had in the fall when the tax credit was a new animal, and you know, we knew about it, but we of course didn't have much experience with it. We were saying as early as September, you know, this would be a choice we would have to make. And then, you know, in January, Mr. Hay shared with us it was most probable or most certain we would have to go with a PPA. So that's certainly the direction that we have been going. With the deadlines that are coming on the project, it is really important for us to seize opportunities to coordinate scope so we don't have gaps and we don't have overlap. So most important is that we find a way to reach a decision in June.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was looking here at the timeline that was put out last night, and I do think trying to meet that June timeframe makes a lot of sense. Yeah, some of the questions I want to follow up on offline do relate to the tax credit and whatnot. You know, my understanding is it's about a $3 million project, so we would get, if I understand right, 30% of that back. So 900,000, if that would come back.
It's not clear to me whether the 30% applies to the soft cost component, but it might. I just don't know. But
Yeah.
yes, it's call it about $3 million project, and it is, I understand, 30% tax credit. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, I also heard Mark Scott and Jay Nardone last night saying, if you had the money, you know, hands down, you should own it. And so a lot of it comes on, well, do we have the money? But then it comes to, well, how much money is it? Is it, you know, is it tying up 900,000 for a couple of years while we build it, and then that comes back, and then it's a $2.1 million, you know, differential, and you know, and so I'd love to just understand, you know, what the financial piece looks like, and then give the select board a little bit of time to see. It seemed there was some interest among some members last night to at least have a conversation about, you know, about whether they want to do that or not.
Yep.
You know, if they can afford it, it sounds like everyone agrees it's a hands down right thing to do. If they have to bond it, then you get into this table here, but I'm like, but would you actually ever bond the $3 million, or would you bond the $2.1 million and just take the 900,000 from cash somewhere and put it back, you know, when you get it back from the credit, once we know how much the credit is. And then the payback periods are different when you move. It looks like on the roof-mounted system, if you buy it outright, it pays back within 12 years. But if you lease it, if you bond it, it's 18 years. So it adds 6 years for the interest payments, basically. And so on the canopy option, it takes 19 years because of all that steel and everything you have to build the canopies to put the stuff on. My belief is, you know, here it says there's no payback, but the panels are still generating power. So my belief is that maybe if you add 6 years like the other one, that maybe that would approximate the end date, which would be 6 plus 19 would be about 25 years. But you're not talking about a building with a roof that has to be replaced. And so, like, how often do canopies have to be replaced? You know, and so there's just a lot of these sort of detailed questions. And is it right to even think of them separately? Or, well, these are all select board questions, I guess, but they could bond one and they could buy the other. Or or should you roll them together? But that's kind of where my head is about a
I
lot of this
appreciate that.
stuff.
The notion of split, so because they're two very different animals is partly why Zapotec kind of represents them differently, and I'm glad they did, because you're quite right. There's very different hard costs involved in the canopies versus the building. But if we were actually going to separate them as projects, that now introduces some new complexity. So new pad-mounted transformers on the site, disconnect switches, they would essentially sort of be operating independent of one another. There are some other, and I know Mr. Nardone was sort of vacillating about how much detail do we sort of throw at this. There's an awful lot of detail that backs up that summary in the Zapotec report. Their runs include assumptions that equipment will need to be replaced. I believe it's in year 13. I believe it's in year 13 inverters have to be replaced. They have a relatively short shelf life. And so that's some real expense. I think actually the grid on the canopies, my memory was right. I think just the inverter replacement was going to be something like $79,000 or $80,000. So you're right, you don't have to replace like a membrane roof on a canopy. I mean, it could be a steel roof, it could be a metal roof of some kind, needs maintenance, but it's not a membrane roof. But there are still components that do have to be replaced. And then over time, the efficiency of the system in general will fall. So, as they always do. So we won't be generating as much in year 20 as we would be in year 1, but it's not like it goes completely dark, in year 20.
One thing I didn't fully understand just in what you said, and thank you, by the way, that was helpful. I didn't understand the extra transformer, because if in a PPA model you have some of your generation happening outside of the meter, and then we have our 5,000 square feet happening within the meter, you have whatever transformer you need for the PPA. Wouldn't that be the same thing if you brought, say, the roof-mounted solar into the building behind the meter and the canopies were outside? Maybe the canopies aren't attractive enough for a PPA alone. Maybe they're too small. But I didn't understand what the extra transformer was.
So if Mr. Nardone was here, he could explain it more eloquently than I could. We had some pretty detailed conversations on this very point over the past couple of weeks.
Well, I can follow up with it.
Yeah.
And Mr. Nixon?
Please do, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Nardone referenced a complete report. He said this was sort of an executive summary of the complete report. There was a 20-page report when he came to speak to us. Is it possible for the committee to see the complete report?
I don't see why not. It was something between 20 and 30 pages.
So I'm wondering, like, for people that are sort of more interested in the mechanics of it, and that if that might
Sure.
help.
I think part of what added to the size of it, though, was they were including information on things like canopy A, canopy B,
Right,
canopy
the options.
D. And he just said, wait, we don't need to confuse people, because we actually have gone through that whole process.
Right, you've
So,
already done that for
I mean,
us.
that's just, it's inescapable, right? Zapotec is not sitting with us in these conversations.
Yep.
They sort of sit in their offices and the phone rings, they're like, can you give us an update? So they do, and then they didn't realize that, that was sort of the direction we were going for
Right.
option C. So I'll speak to him about that, but I think that was largely why it was a thicker report. If there's specific things I think people are interested in about sort of the detail and the backup, reach out to us by email and let us know. I think he's trying to sort of balance how much information we're
Yep.
throwing, so people's eyes don't sort of glaze over.
Yeah, I'm just hearing different levels of interest here on the board, sort of
Yeah.
about it. So
Yeah.
if it's available, it's available. If we find
Yep.
it useful, we'll read it.
Yeah.
And it might help you guys then too, instead of being bombarded with questions that we could probably find
I mean, I can
ourselves.
tell you there's definitely more detail in terms of the financial analysis that drives that summary report.
Yep.
Where you will clearly see what assumptions are around the annual escalation in utility cost, the tax credit, the SMART program, and so forth. So, as well as energy production. So, I mean, there's
Yeah,
a
that
lot
could
of
be
numbers there,
helpful.
but I mean,
Yeah.
that could absolutely be put forward.
That's good.
Yeah.
Any other
And
questions?
do you know if it's going to be shared with FinCom, the financial analysis, for them to take a look at as well?
I mean, anything we're sharing is a public document. Nobody from FinCom, I think, has reached out.
Okay.
Um,
It's just, it was mentioned a couple times yesterday by like Jay and like the select board.
Oh, I
so
think I
was
even
just-
brought it up, too. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I'm suggesting to Mr. Mucci and Ms. Rudolph that as they contemplate that scenario,
Yeah,
they might want to get input from FinCom.
right.
I don't want to, I don't know who exactly on FinCom would sink their teeth into this, but it might be helpful.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I feel like that's for them to
To work out,
work out, right?
work out amongst themselves.
I mean, I feel like it was my place to make a suggestion, right?
Right. I have a couple comments if there's,
Please.
at the end. And you started out with this, Mr. Chair, and I just want to, and I know you all know this, but I also just want to remind and remember that the scope of this, of the authority of the school committee is strictly around leasing the site for PPA. Absent your vote to allow for that to be explored, nothing happens, and I know that, but it is also the select board's role to have further conversation around this and make a determination as to whether or not they want to pursue the funding to be able to purchase the system. And so I don't think it's incumbent upon EFPBC or the school committee to make sure that everybody has a copy of the information like FinCom. I mean, the EFPBC has the chair of FinCom is on the EFPBC, I believe.
Nope,
Is there a member of,
there is a member, but not the chair.
okay, thank you. There's a member of, right? There's also a member of the select board who is on EFPBC. So there are as many opportunities for people to have and committees to have the information as you have had, although you've asked for it and it's come and it's been presented to you. So I'm not clear entirely, I guess, as in management, as Beth is in management with Mr. Toogood on the town side. Are there expectations of me to coordinate with town management to figure out who needs what for this decision-making to take place? Or I think it's clear, it was clear to me, the select board has to have, they're gonna have another discussion, I believe, around this as to whether or not they have funding available. It wasn't readily apparent last night that was going to be the case. But if you do have expectations of me, I would just like to know what they are. Doesn't have to give them to me tonight. I'm happy to facilitate getting information to town management, who can then get information to the select board, as opposed to us trying to do it directly. It should really be town management to school management, I think, just from a protocol standpoint. And, you know, if there are, obviously, EFPBC, if there are questions, I think Jay was very clear last night, as Mr. Nixon, that they're available to answer questions along the way. So, but.
Yeah, I think of our role, you know, on the school committee, obviously our scope is limited in some ways, but we are a big piece of the town, and we like to be collaborative with the select board. You know, I appreciated the collaboration that we had with the Wellfield property that enabled the design of the new Lynch to be the way it is by getting the transfer of that property, et cetera. And so, you know, my hope here is twofold. One is, you know, just as a citizen, as a town meeting member, as a member of the school committee and chair, you know, I'd like to just understand it, you know, the financial picture. But I'd also like to give the select board, because you know, the financing of it is outside of our scope. You know, we don't have the ability to tap into the sources of funding that they do. But I'd like to be able to give them an opportunity, you know, to see if they think it's going to be something they can find. I'm fully committed to 100% net zero building. I believe we have a consensus on our board and their board to do that. So, and I understand the latest timeline has a June deadline, and so yeah, I think it was originally September at one point, but maybe that didn't factor in the July 90%, the April document.
It's always midsummer for a decision about which pathway to go. September is when the bid documents will be done.
Okay, well, but anyway, last night I learned that it was end of June, and I think that's fine. You know, people go away for the summer. We ought to have this resolved by then. But I think, you know, even though we don't control all the levers, we do work collaboratively with the select board, and everyone agrees that, you know, hands down, if there's the money for it, this is an asset that you invest in that generates money. It's a printing press to some degree. Mm-hmm. And so if we can buy it, everyone said we should buy it. And so I'm like, let's just give a chance to see if they can find a way to buy it. And if not, then we just go to then, we maintain our commitment to a net zero building and we put the PPA question out.
And respectfully, I'm not suggesting that you don't have an interest as a town meeting member, as a citizen
Yeah.
of the community. I also just think that it's not your job to educate the select board, the FinCom, about the financing of this project.
But we're educators.
We are educators. We are educators.
Some of us are.
I'm hoping that,
Ultimately, they're the ones that are going to be making the decision. Hopefully, they're asking the questions, because if they don't understand it at the level that you all want to understand it, then that's a problem, right, for them in terms of their own decision making. So, and to your point, everyone last night in the joint meeting, everyone's agrees net zero, and we know we can achieve net zero, which is great news. It really is just this question of how to move forward, and the select board really is the only body that can push that forward in whatever way that they might be able to do that. And I'm not suggesting it's easy.
yeah, and I have every hope and belief that that's what they're doing, that they're asking the same questions and getting to the bottom of that. So,
I think as long as everyone has an understanding of the timeline and by when we need a decision, then they can arrange their schedule as they need to help meet that timeline. So I just think that's the important. It sounds like that's a key factor.
It's
and there's still 5 weeks or so. It ought to be. I mean, I don't know how much time. I don't know how their process works and things, but let's see what decisions we can get to, and then we move on from there. Because you never have all the information, and we'll see what we can get by then, and let them see what they
yeah,
can
absolutely.
get.
No, they establish a timeline at this point, really. And
Yeah, I mean,
figuring out
the most important piece of information we need is what they
Right.
want to do, and whether they can come up with the money.
First right of refusal.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Anything else before we move on? All right. So the next item on the agenda was discussion of committee assignments, and I did 2 things. I put I just took the committee assignments or the committees and liaisons and other roles that we have, and I put them into a document, just a blank document, and I put that in our shared drive. I ask if people have multi-year commitments on different committees or boards or things, let me know, and we'll get that updated in the list. Separately, I also sent a feedback sheet to understand what people's preferences are, and I see this as sort of a first cut of, are there certain things that you're really interested in, or you're somewhat interested in, you're willing to do, or that you're just not able to do. Maybe the time of day isn't right, or maybe you have a conflict with something else. But just as a baseline, it would be helpful to know that, in trying to think about this. And meeting, with, anyone who's interested, but I already have, interest in meeting to talk about committee assignments in the beginning phase, but certainly once we gather the information, we have a better sense of everyone, and we can start to fit pieces together where folks complement each other, where schedules work. Then I'll be reaching out to talk about recommendations of how we can fill these roles. But anyway, I wanted to put it out in the event that there were roles or positions that I'd missed, or that people thought maybe I shouldn't have, or or other things. I just wanted to have that on the agenda. So,
I'd just love to see the office hours come back. I think people like to meet in person, and rightly so. That wasn't probably the most popular thing at a time, but I'd love to see that come back. I think people enjoy meeting in person and having the chance to chat informally.
okay.
Did we not also talk about a committee on fees?
There was going to be a committee on fees, wasn't
We
there?
did.
I don't see that on there either.
Okay. Mr. Nixon, you look like you're deep in thought.
Well, at the bottom of your chart, you're looking for members for units A through E.
Those
So,
It's grayed
Those
out.
are grayed
That's-
out.
oh, that's what the color change
Just not to
means.
lose
Okay.
it.
That's just a future. So I
I saw it
benefited.
listed. I didn't realize the
Yeah.
distinction in the colors.
Yeah.
Got it.
I benefited from the documents from prior
Prior
chairs.
years, okay.
So for future folks, I want them to
Oh,
know
I got
that
it.
just
Okay.
because we settled them,
Could start 3 years early.
yeah.
And Mr. Brady had offered, we found
What
office
did you
hours
just say, Mr. Brady?
start 3 years early.
Made a little joke
I
from time to time. Running start.
I just offered that we found office hours most successful when we posted them as school committee meetings, and we found times that 2 school committee members could be there. So it would be a commitment not only to be present for office hours, but to keep notes on them as well, which isn't a big lift. I just, we found that that was, worked best for the committee as a whole, to operate them that way over time.
So on that note, so for those office hours that.
Like a subcommittee. It became a subcommittee of the school committee for
Okay.
office hours.
So if we had 2 school committee members engaging in conversation, like over, I'm assuming, would this be virtual, Mr. Brady, or no?
No, it would be in person.
Oh, okay. So I'm just reflecting on our past experience.
Right.
Where it was virtual. So we
We
could
did
have,
we started in person.
but we could have, in the Zoom mode, you could have the entire school committee
You could.
there and watching, just 2
Right.
are engaging. So in
Right.
that model, that was posted as a subcommittee, or,
It was,
interesting,
yeah.
okay. I was not aware of that. Okay.
But I think you could do it other ways as well.
Well, I think if you meet in person and there's a quorum, you gotta post it as a meeting, and that's your point, right?
Right.
Yeah,
My point would be to not have a quorum, so you wouldn't have to post it as a meeting.
I get it,
So people could be more, perhaps,
I get it.
open with their questions that they don't want people
I
taking
don't know,
notes
people
on.
were pretty open.
I'm sure some people were.
Yeah.
I would just say
Those
that's-
people have their own.
Yeah.
If that's the case, it's not school committee office hours, it's office hours with Mr. Brady and Mr. Nixon, or
Sure.
Mr. Brady and
Could be.
Ms. Bergstrom, it's,
Could be.
Which, by the way, anyone can have
I
their
get it.
personal office hours anytime they want.
They
Yeah.
could.
They could.
They
Could.
certainly could.
Um,
Okay.
Other input now, and this is the beginning of a process, so, we can talk about this, certainly once we get a better sense of where people's interests are. Unless there's other, on that, I want to move on to consideration of maintaining all the fees at, current rates for 2023, 24. Sorry, I can't read tonight. Dr. Hackett, do you want to set us up?
Certainly. So we have been talking about fees for a couple meetings now, and we know that, as was just mentioned, the suggestion, I believe, from the Finance Subcommittee is to create some either committee or task force to really kind of do more of a kind of a comprehensive review of fees, to come up with some recommendations, moving into potentially to come back to this committee, obviously, for your consideration, for moving forward past the 23-24 school year. In light of that, and I think that is the right process, because everyone's affected differently by different fees, from, as you have talked about, athletics to arts to even fundamental transportation to school, which we do have a fairly, I think, rigorous fee for our transportation, although we do also provide very good service with our transportation. So I think looking at it in total makes a lot of sense. You did waive the Lynch transportation fee for next year, and it would be waived again for the following year. So you have reduced for that particular reason. And I believe there's interest in more than one committee member looking at potentially trying to work our way into not having fees or reducing fees over time, which I think could be within the purview and the charge of the subcommittee or task force for fees. So at this point, parents are planning. We are going out on transportation registration, which I forgot to mention last time, at the end of this month, I believe, the 28th, next week. Which we would want to publish the fee structure for that purpose. So I thought we had more time. We didn't, so I'm bringing it back to you tonight and hoping that you would consider just maintaining all the fees at the current rates. This doesn't even really take an action. You don't have to vote. You just don't vote, and they stay the same, or you can take a vote in the affirmative to maybe, I think, just more for communication and clarity. So that's my recommendation.
Do we have a copy anywhere of like all the fees? Like, I couldn't tell you what the parking fee is, the high school.
There's no parking fee at the high
There's
school.
no,
No
we
parking
have one?
No, there's no parking fee at the high
Okay.
school.
Yeah, there's no parking
My
fee.
blood pressure just came down.
There's no part, so, but what do we
Not in
charge
favor
for?
of parking
Does
fees
it
at the
cost to
high
be in the
school.
play at the high school? I don't know these things.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
various.
How much does it cost?
Right.
There's various
And I think
fees,
that's
yeah.
what,
Yeah.
why we talked about having the working group.
But it would be good to have a list, like
Right.
we're
Yep.
agreeing to perpetuate fees that I don't know what I'm perpetuating, so shame on me for however many years now I've agreed to whatever the play fee is, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, can we have a list of
Sure.
that all?
Yes,
That
is
would
the
be-
short answer to the question, and I think the task force doesn't have to be a year-long study on the entire picture either. I mean, at some point, the committee might make a decision that they want to come back with a specific targeted recommendation during the process without a comprehensive total look as well. But yes, we can put together certainly a list of fees.
I just offer that periodically over the years, when the committee has revisited fees, and sometimes in the aggregate, there's a couple of different models that administration has put forward. Some of them are quite good. I hung on to them. This is even before the days of Google Drive. So I'll just go find them, and I'll share them with the committee through Dr. Hackett, because if there are some, just organizational models that folks feel are particularly strong, we could just recreate. I mean, some of this goes back to JD, Andrew. Anyway, they were good. To Dr. Hackett's point, we don't have to do anything tonight. I get that. I was going to make a motion that we not increase fees for the 23-24 school year. That's my motion, but I'm wording that very carefully. Because while I understand you're under the gun for transportation, there may be a little bit of time for other fees out there. And as I was saying at the last school committee meeting, we always know more 2 or 4 weeks from now than we know today in terms of costs and cost avoidance on our ledger. So if there is, whether it's to roll out registration for busing, because you have to, or it's about sending a message to families on all the other fees that we want to reassure them, I'd be happy to make that motion that we not increase fees for the 23-24 school year.
Dr. Hackett?
Second.
Oh. All right. So we have a motion and a second, so we can discuss that. My question to you, Dr. Hackett, is does that feel like it gives you the certainty that you need for communicating?
Yes, no, absolutely. No, I understand the intent of the motion, and you may revisit strategically at some point.
Great. Other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 What's aye? Congratulations, you got,
Oh, thank you.
you have a
That felt like a.
No
You don't have to
increase.
charge people more money?
Yeah.
Yay.
Guys.
all right.
Can I just say for the record,
Yeah.
I am as opposed to a parking fee for students at Winchester High School today as I was when it was first broached 6 years ago. And I do not see my position changing. So just want to get that on the record. But now we can continue.
The parking makes me think about those EV chargers that we have out there, because obviously there's a fee with those. And maybe once we get to 100% solar, we can provide free charging
killing
as
me.
well. to
Please, let's not
students.
go to parking tonight.
Just
The
killing me.
parking spaces were never approved by the school committee.
Maybe if you
Oh, okay.
eliminate the bus fee, you'll have more kids riding the bus and less kids driving to school.
There you go.
There you go.
And then maybe if we put in a late bus, that would get even better. I
Blowing
mean,
my
just
mind.
crazy
Just
talk.
blowing
I'll
my
say for
mind.
the record, we should eliminate all the fees, because we're Winchester and we can afford it. But
Well, that's what
That on the record.
that's what our task force will look at. Operational update, Dr. Hackett.
Yes, I'll hand it off to Mr. Marin. He can give us an update on several items. A lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's right into transportation. So as Dr. Hackett mentioned, next week we'll be opening up the online registration portal. If you remember last year, we converted from a paper process to online. So we did some fine tuning this year with the system. So last year you could register kind of one preference, but we noticed a lot of folks would register for after school childcare, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, they'd want to be transported home. So we kind of managed that through email and one-offs, but now we program that in so you can add a second preferred option. So it'll come through and we can kind of proactively manage it. Also, we waive the fees for lunch transportation. So we know for a lot of families at Lynch, this will be a new process. So we'll be communicating that probably later this week to introduce it to those families there. And the goal is that we'll have all those registrations in. Normally we get the bulk of it by the end of the school year. with more kind of tapering in over the summer. And then by probably mid-August, we'll communicate that out to families, what the assigned routes and stops are and expected pickup times. We'll be continuing with the bus ride app for families too. So just like you track an Uber or Lyft, you can see that bus as it's expected to arrive and its departure to schools. So
Do we have any idea what the adoption rate is of the app? We have any way to know that? Do we have any way to know how many people are using the app or downloading the app or?
yeah, I haven't checked. I can look at that.
Okay.
I think it's pretty high.
Be curious.
What I remember.
And on the app, that's only available to people whose kids are riding the bus, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If no one from the public can just track the bus, you have to have a student
Are you
registered.
Is the access given by bus? Like would I only see my kid's bus, or do I get access to the whole town's buses if I?
Correct. It would just be your student's bus.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So we sync with our student information system, and then once we assign a student to a route, that then gives you as a parent or guardian access to see that student's route. So
I love it.
Yep.
And I don't want to belabor busing, but when Lynch parents sign up, will they know what the earliest pickup will be? Like, are they going to still, do you know what I mean? Like, they won't have a pickup before 7:20. Do we know that yet? To be able to tell them to encourage people to sign up? They don't think their kids are going to be picked up at 6:45.
We've already communicated with the
Have you?
parents.
That's
yeah.
what I was that's what I was
I think
wondering.
what we present on the website, it may say that this route may start around 7 a.m.
Okay.
We didn't put all the times because we have to go through the process, see who registers for what
Right.
stops, and then it kind of dilutes and adds to it. But yeah, let me confirm. I know we won't be in our planning. Nothing starts before 7 a.m.
Okay. I just don't want to discourage parents from signing up because they think it would be earlier than they want to get their kids out the door. So as long as we can, especially give Lynch
Yeah.
parents the earliest pickup, that would be great.
Yeah, I can work on how to introduce that, and then in August we would kind of confirm those expected
Right.
arrival times and
Yeah.
do that. Okay.
And I might just add, just as a back of the envelope calculation, that if there's one bus going to Lynch now and there's going to be 8 buses taking Lynch people, that's 7/8 or almost 90%, 87%, something like that, are Lynchies who are used to getting to school a different way that we want to go on a bus. And so the more we can do to help onboard them, I guess, to the idea, the better. I know for us, we're one of those families, and so I have no idea where you go to pick up a bus or how that works. I love the idea there's an app so that I can track it and I don't have to
Yeah.
stand out there with them early or anything.
It's pretty
Yep.
slick.
Yeah, but just the vast majority of the kids don't take a bus now. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Yep. Go to the next one. Let's see. So we have some IT updates. We're fortunate enough we had 3 high school seniors this year kind of enrolled in their IT co-op program. I wasn't sure if we had done that before in previous years, but I think it's been new recently. They've been helping with us deploying our 2FA to faculty and staff for their Gmail access, working on device inventories. You may notice in the main lobby of the high school, we have new digital signage, kind of a cloud-based system on the back end. And they're going through and kind of documenting a lot of the procedures in the auditorium and the AV to kind of pass that knowledge on to the other classes as they graduate. So
Awesome.
they're doing great work there. And then the next slide, this gives a rough overview of some planning for IT as we go through the next couple of years, mostly around our infrastructure. But if you recall, in previous updates, we spoke to some of the wireless access point upgrades that we've been making across the district. So I'm kind of moving to a new kind of modernized Wi-Fi for the district that's kind of prepare us for the next several years here, like a Wi-Fi 6 platform. And it's all through our E-rate process through the federal government that we do in the winter. Let's see what else. Some items of note, we kind of, right now we have some redundant ISP lines coming in, and they're all consumer grade at this point. So this summer we'll be moving one of the lines to a more enterprise grade, and we're going to up the service so it get 2 gigabit kind of throttle. That gives a little more bandwidth for us to manage the traffic that we're seeing here. And then right now doing a lot of things around auditing some of our back-end kind of power needs and network assessments, and trying to consolidate some of our systems to kind of less on-prem and things we have to manage to more cloud-based applications and virtualizing efforts. So.
Can I just get a question on that?
Sure.
So upgrading our fiber to more of a commercial grade, how is our current condition sort of manifesting itself for students? Is this, so when you speak to that greater bandwidth, do we have problems today?
Yeah, we can see some days we're close to kind of peaking our bandwidth. We see, I'm not sure the original design of this building, but we can see students with, more than one device or with their personal devices and riding on the network, especially days with testing, and we have a lot of bandwidth going on, and it's shared throughout the district. So we have had a few days maybe in the fall and winter where we had some issues with that peaking of the load there.
And when that happens, so how does that manifest itself? Like, are there just apps that won't open, emails slow?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
speed or things are just literally crashing?
It becomes sort of throttled. Everything slows
Okay.
down.
Got it.
So some layers are there of upgrading that actual enterprise-grade fiber, but then we're also evaluating for maybe a future year this process of, it's called SD-WAN, which basically can take your inputs across the district and balance it across multiple ISPs and better, so you can get like the full spectrum of broadband that we have. So that's the future thing we're looking at. And we have some shared, it's shared with the town as well, so we kind of lay on top of each other. So some of their traffic can cross over here and vice versa. But overall, it's a pretty good setup here that Winchester's invested in terms of redundancy and having multiple ISPs, and is very well laid out. Some of the efforts that I think were started maybe a while back through Dr. Ellen Emma and WIFI and this committee, kind of setting up the infrastructure. So we're kind of building upon that setup there. So.
I know these are wireless upgrades, and so Lynch would be new, not an upgrade, but I noticed Lincoln isn't on there either. Is Lincoln just in really good shape now?
I think that's in 27. I think I just didn't fit it.
It's the next column.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is kind of the budget for it, but as we go through E-rate and see what we have for funding, and I'd like to maybe pull in some of those schools maybe earlier to kind of get everyone on the new system if we can afford it.
Okay.
So we have, E-rate is in a 5-year cycle all the time, and we can see where we are for funding and what they approve, and so if we can bring it in sooner, that'd be the goal. I think that's in 27 if I added a column, so.
Is Morocco the last redundant fiber that we need, or do other folks still need redundant fiber?
Correct, Morocco would be the last one. Right, Dr. Elenoma, I think, yeah. And that's currently, I think the town is, they're procuring the fiber, and then we're waiting on an update when it would be installed, but I don't think they've received the fiber yet, so.
The fiber was always the problem. We couldn't run it over there for redundancy, but now we can, so.
Anything else on that end of it? Okay. So food services, run through it. So we were able to get a grant because Northeast Foods food grant, which encourages us to purchase locally. So the department here has some great vendors for purchasing local seafood and meats and different produce from local farms in the areas. So this will be helpful in spending that. We'll probably spend it down the first couple months next fall for the district, I think. So, and then 2 other things for it. We've starting a return to our composting programs. So at Ambrose and Lincoln, they're kind of back to that full effort, and then we're planning for the other schools into next year as we can get volunteers and kind of rebuild those green teams that used to exist out there. And then some menu updates. I know we had a recent survey done with Whitson's that I think we sent through families through Parent Square. So we can share those results once we get that. And they're making some menu updates. I know they added additional salad to the elementary school. And working some things for kind of the final menus for the school year here. So. And then safety security, we have some updates on. We applied to a few grants. One was through the state, which is the Safer Schools and Communities grant. And so we applied for up to $150,000. That would be $50,000 for 3 schools, which were Lincoln, Morocco, and McCall for security cameras. The award announcement was pushed to the end of June. Okay. And so they said they got a lot of applications and they're working through it. And then we also applied a few weeks ago to the DOJ's School Violence Prevention Program, SVPP, and that was in partnership with the Winchester Police Department and we applied for just under 500 grand for that, 499 something. So,
What kind of programming or what does that?
that's similar to Safer Schools. You can apply for a lot of hardware.
Okay.
So upgrades to some of that infrastructure for security cameras and access control, alarm systems. And then you can apply for some other systems too, like visitor management and kind of confirming visitors that are coming on site. So those types of systems there. And we go to the next one. So facilities, just some photos of the Lincoln Gym in the lower level. So that work has been completed. Lincoln has a new logo there in the center of the floor. It looks great if you go see it in person. It's
Lovely.
really nice.
Great.
And facilities, they cleaned up kind of some of the basketball hoops and repainted the area. It looks really nice there. And the same with the lower music room too is all new, and that kind of abutting hallway is all new tile work there.
Andrew, do you know on Lincoln when the slide's gonna be fixed?
Yeah, so meeting with facilities this week, we've been getting some quotes. Like anything, it's kind of snowballed because it's the existing slide is bolted into the ground and concrete. So to take that up, and now impacts that rubber surface there. So I know we got one quote. We want to try to get two more, see price-wise.
Okay.
But I know it's a priority for us to get that fixed where
Thank you.
we've had it purchased. We have sealed it off, the existing one. If you've seen the board there.
Thank you.
And let's see, other updates, facilities-wise, so as Dr. Hacker mentioned, working on those final office moves by the end of the school year for central office. And then also this week, we're looking to open the bids for the Lynch school move too. So that'll be a whole process that we've done some site walkthroughs, and there'll be some work to move folks there, so. There's a lot of stuff
I'm
there.
gonna wait till the modulars are in place before I do a walkthrough with my kids anyway.
So I was, when I was over there the other day and for the really kind of the first time I was thinking about the move, and just then the stuff seemed to come at me off the walls. It's just so much stuff. So it's going to be a piece of work.
Yep, we're gonna do it in multiple phases to kind of clear out furniture in existing buildings, and we know we've had a lot of interest in Lynch. They've already started packing and organizing things, and we'll have a whole label
ready.
system, and yep, so they're ready to go.
What are we doing? For
Just the last slide here
Oh,
would be an update on our playground assessments. So I know I emailed the committee maybe last week on this process so far. But the facilities in partnership with the district, we contracted an outside playground safety inspector to review all of the playgrounds across town. The assessment was completed, and it listed a prioritized list of areas that needed kind of immediate attention and future attention there. So we had to make some initial improvements in terms of closing equipment that was non-compliant or non-accessible. We've been adding surface mulching, to some rubber surfacing areas that was not compliant, along with some temporary fencing to kind of close some of the equipment as well. As I mentioned, in progress, we're gathering quotes for some of the larger work. I know Lincoln and Ambrose could use updates to that rubber surface that exists, along with Lincoln and the slide replacement that we have. So that's that. There's, a lot of improvements that we can work on, but these are the priorities, along with some playgrounds that aren't on the school side, but are on the town side. So facilities is taking the lead on this, and we're working with them to work through it. So.
And are these budget areas that are out of our budget to fix, the select board, the town budget to fix, DPW budget? Now that we've done this assessment, what are the funding sources that we need to identify to be able to do the work?
So that's sort of the topic now. I know that we've.
You mean I asked $1 million question?
Yeah, kind of.
So select board funded the
The
inspector
study,
through
yeah.
ARPA. The district has chipped in for some of that surface mulching
Yep.
effort, and then the larger work we're working with facilities on to see what funds would be available here, either through the ARPA or other sources that we have, but we're not final yet on those. We know we also have at the Ambrose School some parent funds that were raised towards the effort too, so we can see how that would be integrated. But
So this may be, this work that was done may actually be to develop a plan to articulate what kind of funding we would need moving
Yep.
forward, whether it be
Yeah.
CPA,
Larger capital
ARPA,
requests, yeah.
whatever we can find.
Yep.
to-
Or capital.
Yep.
Capital,
Yeah, that was
all
one.
kinds of places.
There's one
we can
component. If we
look.
could combine a few of these into a larger capital project, or
Right.
it'd be ideal. But yeah, I definitely see it being a multi-year process to
Okay.
get up
And I
to speed.
think
Yeah.
we can also get the community excited about it. I mean, people like to
Right.
raise money for playgrounds. I can speak from experience. It's not that difficult to get parents to fund playgrounds.
Yet
and
another funding source.
put them together. But I think we have to Andrew's point, you have to articulate what the
Right.
need is, and I don't know if we've yet done that. So I'm very thankful that the select board did this. It was definitely very much needed, so appreciate that.
I also think as we go through this conversation, one of the things that that I'm aware of, or we all are aware of, I know at a level, is I think we need to have a conversation about, I don't think any individual school, because a parent organization or that particular school community can raise a lot of money, how do we treat that, right? I mean.
Shouldn't get a better playground than
Well, I
somebody.
mean, maybe we need to define our baseline as to, this is what we as a district, as a town, fund for the
Yep.
playground. Is it the surface and then, some structures or whatever it may be, but I think it's a conversation, it is a conversation that we would like to bring back to you, and really, I think it would be a good topic or item for the facilities discussion at
Yep.
this summer, just kind of so we can understand how you're thinking about it. Because I do think we need to put some parameters around what we can do, so people could just know how to plan and what to expect. Anyway.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Are there district playgrounds where things have been closed off because of a lack of accessibility, or are those general town municipal playgrounds?
I think both. Yeah, I think Morocco, we closed something due to accessibility.
Yep.
There's like orange fence around it. I'm forgetting what that equipment is. It's some. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm asking because ADA was voted in 1991, so that was now a long time ago. And although we have, Morocco as a building predates ADA, the playground does not. And that, the Morocco playground was largely, if not entirely, actually funded through parent donations.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's why it's the biggest one.
So, the question I was gonna ask is, just because an element is not accessible, doesn't necessarily mean it's in violation of ADA, right?
Yeah.
Because there have to be components that are accessible. So I was just gonna ask whether it's Mr. LaRue who has that sort of granular understanding, and/or have we actually touched base with the Disability Access Commission? Because they are our local, authorities having jurisdiction. They have engaged with us in the past helpfully on school projects to say, this is fine, yes, this is an
Right.
issue. And not only this is an issue, sometimes they even have recommendations on how to address it related to the
Like
question of
accessible
funding.
Gaga pits?
What's that?
I said like accessible Gaga pits?
Yes, and
Basketball
but
courts.
to Ms. Bergstrom's point about funding, the DAC actually is allocated $125,000 a year by town meeting for disability access improvement. So if there are areas of playgrounds that the DAC would agree need to be addressed, there actually may be a funding source for that. But just as importantly, DAC may actually look at that and say, well, here's a sort of cost-effective solution. Some of the chair of the DAC has a lot of experience in sort of this very thing. So I don't know, have we reached out to them? Are they engaged at all?
I'm not sure at this point if they have been. Yeah.
Okay, so I would suggest we do that before, well, let's say before final plans are sort of developed, because I think they could have a helpful perspective to see as this is evolving, particularly as it pertains to the scope and the cost.
Or to reassess what's been closed off currently before we come back in the fall.
That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of things that we can look at and understand are not accessible, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be closed off. So, but there's ways to vet that.
Yep. No, that's a great point.
Thank you.
I had a question just back on the last, when you were talking about moving all the stuff out of Parkhurst and either you, Mr. Marin, or Mr. Nixon might have the answer. It's probably been stated before, but as we clear everything out of there, what are we doing for new desks and chairs? And are they temporary desks and chairs? Are they things we're pulling out of a closet, or are they new stuff that's going to go into the new Lynch? Just
It's a 6-foot COVID
I was gonna say.
extravaganza.
Yeah.
We've got
Yeah,
more
so
the-
desks and
desks.
chairs than,
Yeah, the,
Days.
the items going into Parkhurst, we're gonna prioritize, we bought so much furniture during COVID that's been stored at McCall in Morocco, so that's coming over first. And then we're gonna backfill from Lynch, anything else that Parkhurst needs.
okay.
And anything remaining at Lynch will go through a surplus process. So I know when Rec has some interest, and then we can open it up to other municipalities. But then going to new Lynch, it's gonna be all new FF&E through a process there. So nothing old would be coming to the new Lynch in
Great.
terms of furniture and fixtures, so.
and by old, we mean like 2 years.
2 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I would see anything remaining at Parkhurst, and then we kind of evaluate to see if we can bring it into other schools or store for other needs too on our end, so.
Great, thank you. Anything else on your operational update?
That's it for my end.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
that was
Andrew.
very helpful. So next is our 23-24 business office structure overview, and I'll put it over to Dr. Hackett again.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've also been having conversations throughout, well, I think since I've been here, about the fact that we have struggled, to find a director of finance and operations. That position's been posted since, I don't know, since COVID.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say, since our previous,
yeah,
what,
since-
since our previous director of
Since your
finance
previous
here
director of
left.
finance, right. And it is clear now to me that Mr. Rowe is absolutely committed to not being here. So he's just, he's went to France, he's really enjoying his retirement that he did like 10 years ago in the way that he should. And he's just been a tremendous support and will continue to remain a tremendous support for us. And Mr. Nixon mentioned JD. Andrew and Peter have been in regular contact with him. So we're very fortunate that we have two very experienced people who are going to help us and will continue to help us. Andrew has actually been working with Peter on his hours for licensure, and he's been, as you know, going through the budget process with all of us. So all of it. So what you're looking at up here, and Andrew, how do I get this shapes thing off?
Top right, you can hit play.
Top right here, play, or share, right here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's not it. Okay, never mind.
Sorry, it's in there.
So what we're recommending is that you prior to my arrival, you had a position of director of finance and operations. We restructured that, as you know, because we knew we had a part-time business manager, and you would also put the operations manager in the budget prior to that for the 22 school year. God, 22 fiscal year. That ended up being restructured a little bit, which created a position as the senior program manager for operations and planning, which is a position that Andrew currently holds. We are recommending at this point that we go back to the original job description that you have just kind of deactivated for a period of time of Director of Finance and Operations, that you inactivate or deactivate the Senior Program Manager Operations and Planning job role, because clearly we need to see how all of this goes. Those duties were once, as you know, the responsibility of the Director of Finance and Operations. And we are recommending that they return to that position along with the support that's also been provided elsewhere. We have restructured the central registration role. That position is now going to be the administrative assistant for the business office, and you can see in the call-out box that it will be primarily responsible for central registration, but we're also going to be tasking that position with Medicaid reimbursement, which we really need to have a bit better organization and a point person on that process. It is a tedious process. It requires someone paying attention on somewhat of a seasonal kind of basis And just as a reminder, we pay the contracted service for the company to help us with that out of the reimbursements, but we do not receive any of the Medicaid reimbursement funding that goes to the town, as it does everywhere. It's not just Winchester. So we get the pleasure of hiring a physician to take care of it, and we don't receive the funding, but that's just something I've been sore about for 20 years. And
Tell us how you really feel.
don't mean to work through it publicly. That position essentially is a restructure. So the administrative assistant positions all support the business office. These are really much more about the assignments of the roles of these positions that support. And then what a new position would be that we are recommending is the accounting manager. We have an administrative assistant within the business office who would pick up and support the operations side. As you can see, administrative assistant for operations, that's not a new position. That position exists. But the new position in this org chart is the accounting manager, which would really take on, we're looking for someone who maybe even be a certified accountant, who has accounting and finance experience within a school department or within a public sector, even private sector. We've broadened our view of this role, but they would have truly management level responsibilities where they would be taking things over and supporting the director of finance and operations. They would kind of oversee or just make sure things are coordinated between accounts payable, receivable. I'll be working with payroll clerk to make sure that we can get some redundancy around backup, which is something we need to work on within the business office, helping out with procurement, but really eventually having a little bit more of a leadership role within the realm of finance and operations. That, we believe, will be helpful for Andrew, or if he was in the director of finance and operations, if that's the direction we go in, because clearly there's a lot of work going on. We are in the unique position right now of going through a building project. We are doing a lot of stuff around Lynch Move. We're doing a lot of stuff around everything. So the position itself the work is there. So this is the recommendation from us. The action, and I'm not asking for action necessarily tonight, although it would be good for us to be able to, if there's some conceptual agreement around this, I would not mind doing a posting for an anticipated accounting manager role position, pending your eventual approval of the position.
Mr. Nixon, looks like
That's
you may
three
have
questions?
Quick things I want to say.
three things.
So you slipped in somebody's name there at the end, so I just want to be clear. Are we having an organizational chart discussion tonight?
Yes, we are,
talking
sir.
about filling a role tonight?
We are having an organizational chart discussion tonight.
Okay, because I don't have a pinata with me that we could crack just yet. So I'm going to put Ms. Kirby and Dr. Ellen-Emma on the spot with this question, because another role that we had created and it was filled, but for only a moment, pre-COVID, was the Director of Technology. So back in the long ago, when Mr. Walsh held the Director of HR position and JD was here and Dr. Ellen-Emma was here, the three of them shared technology roles. And if I may, I almost might want to put Dr. Ellen-Emma on a spot if you could sort of speak to how you shared that then, because we don't have a technology director. It would be helpful, I think, for the committee to understand what maybe was intended for you to do, and then how it actually worked. And then I'd love to hear from Dr. Hackett. So what are your thoughts about how that I don't want to say burden, that responsibility would be shared in the new model? But can we just hear that for a moment? Because you're basically saying unwind and go back to the way it used to be. But my impression was how we supported technology. There was a plan, but it didn't always sort of work out ideally.
Sure. So I'm not sure what was intended originally, but we at that point had a network person who was, I would say, not like a senior network person in that position. So that kind of side of the house with the infrastructure needed a lot of managing, and a lot of that was JD with that piece, and then Sean helped with that, but also more around the data management of things. And then my role was more around like the teaching and learning part of it. So we do have now a position that didn't exist before, so you're right, it didn't work out that we had a director, and then we tried to split that kind of into two pieces. So there's now a person who reports to me, which is, I can't remember the title, of basically innovative, and it's around the teaching and learning piece. So that's a role that is, I will say, super helpful to me to not be the direct line with that, and much more helpful to the district, because clearly I could dedicate the time to that it needs. And then the infrastructure side was reconfigured so that there are different roles there that work more with Andrew. And then we overlapped the two, but there's some different levels of more senior and more junior people in that piece to take on some of that role, since we don't have. So that's kind of where we are now with it.
Thank you. And so then, Dr. Hackett, sort of given sort of the history and then where we are now, how does your proposal tweak, if anything, responsibilities around technology, whether it's backbone infrastructure or it's instructional tech in the classroom or what have you?
So I mean, you know, not to speak for Dr. Alanema, but she just kind of said it. I think on the instructional tech side, we've got a very good, strong person in the role. There's good coordination with Dr. Alanema's office around that. There's good coordination between the network side, the hardware side, from Andrew's position to Dr. Alanema. We do have a broader level of support in terms of people that we have, actually techs who are going out to do things. I will say to you that your question is a worry in this model. And my worry would be that tech can become consuming quickly in unexpected and very unpleasant ways that we don't have in this model someone who Andrew or anyone else, Jen, myself, can point to and say, you've got to get on this. I think the experience that you had, which is the experience that I've had elsewhere and I've seen elsewhere, it is super difficult to find a director of technology in the public sector and the public school department. We have posted it. We went through, I think, 2 or 3 postings for the position. Anyone who's interested can also make more money elsewhere.
Sure.
So, and it's also a tricky position to find someone who understands hardware network side stuff, but also understands that they're working in a school department, in a school environment. And that is a different setting with different sets of expectations than it is necessarily in the private sector. So I am concerned about, and we need to monitor it, and I will be back to you if it becomes problematic, but if there's anything in here that I'd be worried about could throw this model off, and if it starts to look like it's throwing this model off on a consistent basis and it starts to become a trend, that's when I would come back to you, and we would talk about options. But as it is right now, you know, we think this is the best option because in the absence of being able to find a tech director when we advertise for it, there's really not another option for that.
And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting we should go back to that. I'm generally supportive of what you're bringing forward to us. I think to me, the most impactful thing that Dr. Alanema said when she was beginning her remarks was, I'm not sure how it was supposed to work, but that's key because even from the school committee members' point of view, there was an understanding about some shared responsibility. It almost looked like a Venn diagram. It wasn't like a really clear box for everyone to hold. So I just have some, if it's concern, it's with a lowercase c, but I think it would be helpful that because there is no tech director, there's real clarity about lines of responsibility associated with technology for either fixing problems, decision-making, training, et cetera. So that's what I think we lacked.
Yep.
once upon a time was,
Yep.
was the clarity. And then,
I'm not convinced we have it entirely in this model,
So-
but we will continue to work through it. I would also just say that,
Business office.
from my perspective, coming in new last year, this was your tech department. The year prior to my arrival, I mean, Dr. Alanema, I mean, you know, as far as I can tell, with help and resources from WIFI, basically stood up the remote learning part of the COVID experience that we had. And it was a ton of work. And I think that, you know, I'm not sure that you would want to do it again. However, she just did a tremendous job, as you would expect. So I think now we're kind of in this place where, as you heard tonight, now we're starting to go back to, okay, what are our wireless access points? What's the lifespan of some of the things that we have, and working through that. But schools are demanding, and, you know, teachers have a lesson ready to go, or students have something they want to present ready to go, and if something doesn't work, we've got to have someone there pretty quickly. And we're going to be probably hobbling through that, but I think we're in a good place.
But to your point, like right now, if during MCAS the internet goes down, who fixes it? How do you get it fixed? Andrew?
No, we have network people, and we also have a network consultant on contract with us. It's like for the high level
So you
things.
can just call him and be like, hey,
Yes.
network
And we
consultant.
do.
Yep.
Dr.
Yeah.
Hackett?
And he also works for the town, correct? The town used him some? Yeah.
And
Okay.
other towns, yeah.
Dr.
This is
Hackett?
what he does.
What's basement?
I don't want to be, this is a really fabulous conversation, and I appreciate Mr. Nixon's question, but I thought we were talking about business office, not the entire org chart for the district right now.
Well, we're talking about it because it does relate in the
I
fact that
get-
it is, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It is
Because
connected to
Dr.
that.
Alanema is not on this org chart either, or Ms. Kirby, or anybody else, and how their responsibilities lie. So I just want to make sure that what we have, like, if we're going to have a conversation about technology, that seems like a different.
There's the written curriculum, and then there's the taught curriculum, okay? There's the written org chart, and then there's the reality of
Yeah,
what happens. And,
right.
you know, this is a great place to be. It's a great place to work. It's a great school system. We are lean. I mean, we are lean, and we have people in the central office and out there everywhere doing and picking up responsibilities that they just do. And thankfully, because, you know, it's not always entirely clear, but.
Yeah.
I had a question related to technology, which is just, I feel that I've heard from Mr. Marin over time, multiple cases where we're migrating things to the cloud or to a tech service rather than a sort of a PPA model instead of a direct ownership model of the tech. And I wondered if that was an intentional strategy, and if that eased some of the burden of not having a tech director, because, you know, you have the person you can call, or the, you know, the service level agreements that you're up 999s or whatever. So I thought I'd be curious if that's part of your strategy.
Yeah, I can add that it is a purposeful approach. It's kind of less on-prem infrastructure, even migrating away from things like Active Directory and those kind of typical heavy systems to manage, and going in. We're all in on Google in this district, and kind of leveraging that as our kind of wheel and spoke model to base everything off of Google. So that is our long-term plan, to get away from a lot of the on-prem things. We still have to have some critical stuff on site, and we'll always have to have that. But yeah, that's the eventual goal.
Yeah, more
Well,
tech as a
Google, we
service.
can stop paying for Zoom.
Yep, that's on the list here. So we good.
Mr. Nixon, did you have a number 2 and 3, or was that all of them? Okay. Other comments, questions, discussion on business office structure? Did you want a general
So
nod
to,
of
so
acceptance?
to steal a phrase from you, which you've taught me, it would be helpful if there's consensus among you this evening, so we can start to proceed on the accounting manager position, which is really the next piece of this.
Do we have,
I think that-
I saw
that makes
Mr.
sense to
Brady.
me.
I see some nods over here, a nod over there. I
Thank
think you have consensus.
Thank you.
I think you have unanimous consensus.
The best kind.
Exactly. All right,
you.
so speaking of consensus, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. We are pulling the May 9th meeting minutes off of here because they still need some final touches. But unless anyone has any issue with the 2 grant items, I would take a motion to accept them.
So moved.
we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Chair votes aye. So that passes, great. And that moves us down to number 8, the superintendent, chair, and student rep remarks. So Dr. Hackett, do you have any remarks?
Sure, just to give you a little bit of an update, you had asked at the last meeting, we do close the open enrollment registration form Friday. And at this point, which I think is a pretty solid number, I think we would know that there's not many more that are gonna be coming in.
I
at
won't
this
put one
point.
in tomorrow.
Thank you. Prove me wrong. We have 43 families who are interested in being considered for open enrollment. As you might have guessed, a good fair percentage of those, in fact, over 50% of those, are from Lynch families who are looking to not experience the growing pains of Parkhurst for the next couple of years. So we have already been working on Lynch. We've been working with Chrissy Capodanno around, and also a couple of the other principals, and now bringing in Dr. Emma for just the needs of kids, and trying to make sure that whatever we do with students who may not be coming to Parkhurst, we want to make sure that we put them in places where the services are there and can be provided. So that's the process we're kind of going through now, and hopefully we'll be able to make some determinations within the next few weeks, and sooner as it relates to Lynch, because that is our priority, specifically related to the kindergarten numbers. So, as I said already, we'll have one kindergarten section at Parkhurst, and then we will have another section, or the other students will be, another section will be at Lakin. We are more than likely looking to take all of the Lincoln K students and all of the Lynch K students and mix them together, and create classrooms that are representative of the entire group, and to not put students in a situation where they feel different than, because they are Lynchies, and I know, love that term, but we also want to make sure that we have the students, spread out with others. So
But they're also Lions for a few years.
they are, and they've got a brand new floor. So, so that's the process we're going through right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I wasn't planning to go into a full presentation.
Just
but
have a quick one. You said interest from 43 families. Is that 43 students, or it's more than 43 students?
It is 40. It is less than 43 students. It is 43 students. It is 43 students. But they may be
that
from
your
the same
final answer?
family.
Yes, because you had to fill out the form for
There
each
are
of your
s- There are
students.
siblings.
Okay.
So if you wanted,
43
I
including
knew what I
sibling.
meant.
Okay.
right, 43 students.
Couldn't
And
get it out.
Dr. Hackett, even for the Lynchies, when Lynch is finished, they will theoretically be able to move back to Lynch or stay at the school
The
they've been
messaging right
placed
now
at?
is that they will be returning.
Okay,
Although there may be some situations where we would grant open enrollment ongoing, because they're just situations that just make sense,
right.
period.
So that's on a family-by-family
Yes,
basis?
yes,
Okay.
yes. We had quite a few incoming kindergarten students at Lynch who have siblings in upper grade levels.
Right.
And that's been the biggest challenge, because we're trying to keep them together.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other remarks?
That's it.
That's good, okay. So I have to say, I was a little bit sad to hear about the Lynchies that won't be at Lynch. The thought crossed, our mind about, what we should do with our son, and we're just, the thought of having him not be with all the other Lynchies, with the Lynch teachers, with Chrissy, with, there's such a community there. But it's sort of sad to feel like a few of our Lynchies have fallen out of the nest. But they'll have a great experience.
We know where they are.
Where they are,
Yeah.
and it helps in load balancing, so it's a good thing.
May
all
I
right.
ask one other quick question?
Yeah, please.
Mr. Chair, because the River Street project is likely to bring students this coming school year, and River Street sits in the Lynch district, and there are families who will be moving into that project who aren't here yet, what is your presumption around where those kids are going to go? Because I'll bet we don't have much room for them at Parkhurst. And if that's the case, should we be engaging with someone, or should there be action, the school committee, because we have a district map? Should there be something we might want to consider doing that would more formally direct where students go during this period?
So, yes, it may.
At a future school committee meeting?
Yes. Really want to see how the numbers shake out. And I
Okay.
will say that none of our schools have a lot of room. However, our class sizes in a lot of different grade levels in all of our schools are very favorable. So there isn't any question we can absorb more students as it stands right now. But the question is, can we do it in a way that makes sense in terms of the adjacency of families who are living in those developments to the school that feels like a neighborhood school. So yes, and I'm a little, it's just, as you know, it's a little unpredictable about, we don't know how many students, we have a projection, but what we also don't know is, are they gonna come, will they all be in fourth grade, which, given how things go, could happen, which puts us in a little bit of a different situation. So we're gonna need to be able to stay nimble, I think, and hopefully this is not something we have to solve immediately for September. That we have a little bit of time just to play out how it looks in the fall of next year, because we may get additional kindergarten students or more move-ins depending on how the summer goes.
Well, I asked because when we did redistrict in 2012, following on the VO project, there was quite a line of parents who came to the school committee not happy, saying, I bought this property expecting my kid was going to go to this school. I had no idea. So that's why I raised the question, what might the process be, and if there's a role for us to play, what might that look like?
Yeah, and I mean, there are different ways to get to that
Sure.
point too. I mean, there's full-blown redistricting. There's also a planned transitional districting that can happen as new families move in and provides a little bit more of a little bit of a smoother experience than a traditional redistricting where you're here now, you're there next
Right.
year.
Okay, thank you.
And Dr. Hackett, I know that the leasing agent has reached out to us through the Housing Partnership Committee to get our online registration to make sure families have that as they're signing their lease. Is there a way for us to follow up with them and make sure that that's actually happening, so we're capturing the families as soon as they come in too?
Sure. Yep. And I know Mary Ellen at the town clerk is really trying to coordinate and communicate with different departments and making sure that we are all in the same page around, kind of timelines and what it looks like in terms of the move-ins as we go through the course of the year. So,
Because the online registration should help us
yes, we would hope.
with that.
Yep.
Great. Well, I feel like I've said enough already, but before I invite our new student reps to give their update, I just want to see if any other committee members had any updates or other things from the town they wanted to share. Mr. Beatty?
I'll just thank the Morocco community. They did an excellent job at the concert. And then they also recently had a bingo night, which was quite spirited and exciting for those that attended. So I would encourage anyone in the future who wants to play some heated bingo, head down to a Morocco bingo night. You can play 9 games at once if you make that mistake as I did, and good luck to you trying to keep up with 9 bingo cards. They call them fast.
Any other updates? No. All right, so I'm very excited tonight to introduce our. They've already been introduced, but to welcome our new student reps, Maher Sharawith and Michaela Jens, and give me a little bit of time, and I'll get that even smoother over time. But if you have a report, we'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, so this week is senior week. It's the last week for seniors, so we're just celebrating them and saying bye to them. And their prom is coming up on May 31st, and their graduation will be June 2nd. We also just elected the new officers on student council for the 23 to 24 school year, as well as the regional and school committee rep positions. So we kind of have that all set.
Yeah, student council's kind of wrapping up its events for the year. Thank you. Thank you. And we had our successful event, NOTA, Night of the Arts, and it was it was really it was a good time. A lot of students presented many artworks, and we had a few performances too. And I said it was very successful. But
Yeah, so we're kind of just wrapping up. That was kind of our last. NOTA was our last kind of big event of the year on student council. So we're kind of just wrapping up the year in the next couple weeks and just getting ready for next year. So.
How was bike day?
It's great.
Awesome.
Big
I
turnout.
rode a tandem bike, so
I
that
was-
was.
I was too scared to do that.
I don't know if that was a good idea. I was a little too scared to do
So I
it.
was-
Too scared to do what, Charlie?
Ride the tandem bike.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I was surprised how many, parents were willing to show up bright and
That was
early at like
awesome.
7 a.m. center of town, cheering us on. It's very
Yeah.
nice.
There was a huge crowd right by the Rotary,
Yeah.
and
it was
like
awesome.
everybody was out with their phones, and I saw some cowbells.
Yeah, we caused so much
It was
traffic.
like
It was
big
great.
community event.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Well, welcome. We will help with some onboarding and connect you up with some mentors on the committee. And you have no pressure, but you're welcome to participate throughout the conversations any night. So if there are issues, we'd love to have your perspectives.
Thank you.
And just to manage your expectations, you actually probably can go pretty quickly after we get through the future agenda items because the committee will be going executive session, which you will not be, and you can go home.
All right. So on to future agenda items. On June 13th, we have the finalizing committee assignments and capital presentation.
We'll have several things to talk about on the capital front.
Okay.
Let's call it current and future capital projects.
A capital carnival.
Capital Carnival, she said. We also have future meeting dates, the summer meeting dates, to finalize strategic planning and facilities workshop later in the summer, superintendent evaluation, and late in the summer, our workshop. Those are the agenda items for now. Yes,
Can we add one?
sure.
Lynch Solar?
Oh, that's not a bad thing to have on there. Lynch Solar.
It was implied.
I'm like
Yeah.
the gnat that won't
I
go
was
away.
worried that one
Just
might
want
slip,
to get a
but,
decision.
Speaking of gnats, I'd still love to see our end of the year data to see how our students did academically. That is important. So it'd be great to actually see that information, how they did on Dibbles, how they did on other end of year assessments. I would love to see that.
And I can also suggest we can do a Lynch project update. There's quite a lot we can share now, both with respect to the new build and even what's going on with swing space. We have some great photographs of the new classrooms that are coming from Pennsylvania, and we learned this week they might be leaving the factory a few days early.
Excellent.
Dr. Hackett was real happy to hear that. So lots going on.
Well, we will look forward to seeing that. So with that, our next agenda item is to adjourn into executive session. We will be returning back here for a few more items on our agenda. But if I can have a motion to
So moved.
second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So WinCam is putting us on pause, and then we come back into public session. Is that right?
We do come back. There's a few more items on the agenda afterwards.
Yes, you may be taking action coming out of executive session.
Are we going somewhere?
Yes.
Thank you, student reps.
Thank you.
We're going to
Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Nixon, our next mics are going back up, just so you know.
All right, so we closed out our executive session at 8:32, and we're returning to our regular meeting here now at 8:35. With just a couple action items to take, and Dr. Hackett, do you want to frame the motions? Or?
Sure. So as you are all aware, and for the public, we have been continuing to negotiate. We did have a ratification of an agreement with Unit A. We've had Unit B, with Unit C. We are still in negotiations right now with Unit D, but we also have a memorandum of agreement with Unit E, which we have had for a couple of weeks. We're just bringing it forward, just the way the timing has worked. So I would like to recommend that the committee approve the Unit E memorandum of agreement for the 2022-2025 contract years as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we have four in favor, and it, the motion passes, and one.
One absent.
Yeah.
And as part of the negotiation process that has gone for a few months now, we made some decisions in December to take certain items out of the negotiation of the master collective bargaining agreement prior to ratification, to have a more in-depth look at some issues related to the things that were coming up, specifically special education, caseload, workload, which is ongoing with a working group. We have nurses' preparatory time, which I'm going to talk about in a second. We also have a stipend working group that has, I think, believe that they have they have completed the work, and I am missing one. Am I?
Special education.
Are you?
Special education.
Special
No, I said that
You
right.
mentioned that. I think you
Did I
got
get
it.
them all? Okay,
Stipends?
all right.
Yeah, you got
Just
it.
feels like
Nurses,
more.
it's
Just feels
just
like
three,
more.
right.
So related to the nurses' working group, while we do believe that we have agreement on language for moving forward, we do have to dispose of the issue that for this current school year related to preparatory time, and we're going to do that through a side letter, which would compensate the elementary and preschool school nurse for preparatory time that they were not scheduled to receive, and the language is consistent with the Unit A contract around reimbursement of $25 per hour or per missed preparatory time. So I would ask that the committee approve that as presented as well.
So I move to approve the side letter of agreement for the elementary and preschool nurses as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, so that passes. Any other items for you?
That's all I got.
No?
Motion
Excellent.
to
That was it.
adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned at 8:38 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.